the spread of disease.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thank you very much, Ollie Barrett. Welcome back to the Richie Allen Show. Hope you're well. It's Monday, September 3rd, 2018. Great to be back with you. Thanks for the lovely messages today. I've been watching Twitter and a little bit of Facebook as well. This is your Richie Allen Show. Lot to talk about this Monday. As usual, you can tweet the programme by tweeting at Richie Allen Show and telling me what you're thinking or telling me your thoughts on the big stories of the day. Alrighty then, let's get on with it.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the tweets that are coming in. I'm humbled, I really am. Thanks so much. Great to be back with you as well. I missed you as well, so I did. It's been a few weeks since we last spoke. An interesting few weeks it's been as well. I hope all's well in your life with you and yours. Got a fascinating programme for you lined up tonight. Edwina Curry, former Junior Health Minister, broadcaster and author. Edwina joins me this hour to talk about Boris Johnson's article in The Telegraph today, about the Brexit disaster and more besides. Edwina Curry, an old friend of mine, joins me this hour. And in the second hour, we're off to Oahu in Hawaii, where Michael Rivero, who joins me every month to look over the big stories or the stories making headlines in the independent media. Michael Rivero joins us live from Hawaii in the second hour. And again, if there's anything you'd like to contribute, any comments you'd like to make on anything being spoken about tonight, do so through Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. All right, get rid of the old theme tune then and crack on. I'm not going to dwell too much on my absence over the last few weeks. I might speak more about it a little bit later on in the programme. But I wasn't well at the beginning of August. I've talked about this. I wrote about it on the Richie Allen website, richieallen.co.uk. Serious exhaustion. It was crippling and I had to basically stop. And a few things have happened since then. I've been away on holiday. It's been fantastic to be away for a week down south, down in Cornwall, and chilling out and spending time on the coast and in the countryside. And I really, really liked seeing the nice notes that were sent through Twitter and the website. And I mean that because I'm not and never have been one of those, you know. I don't look for compliments and I don't look for messages and comments on Twitter and on Facebook. But it was nice to see that it meant something to the listeners of this programme. And it meant a lot to me. So thanks so much for that. I really mean it. I've had to reevaluate, though, how I go about things or how I go about things. And there will be a significant change to the show, which I'll talk to you more about in the second hour. Now, don't panic at all because the show will be live 5 days a week as usual. The weekly show will be 2 hours long as usual. And I will do Sunday View at 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings as usual. But there will be a difference to the way I go about it. And I'll tell you more about it, as I said, in the second hour of the programme. Isn't Cornwall lovely though, eh? All the times I heard about Cornwall, all the things I read about it. Spent some time in Falmouth, walked on beautiful beaches, dropped in on some amazing countryside down there. And it wasn't easy coming back to the bedlam of the city. I suppose anybody who's been in the countryside or by the seaside found it difficult or finds it difficult to come back to the bedlam of the city. But the break was marvellous. I'm refreshed, I'm rested and ready to go, and we're into the autumn schedule, so you and I will do this nightly and on Sundays right until I think the 21st of December. Did I mention Edwina Curry will be on the programme this year? I did. Good stuff. Anti-Semitism and Jeremy Corbyn. Now this is interesting because if there's one thing you couldn't escape the month of August, away and relaxing and resting and recuperating and enjoying life with the ones you loved, in my case my better half and our dog, you couldn't escape this anti-Semitism and Jeremy Corbyn stuff. It was everywhere, even on holiday. Now, the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, who'd be, I suppose, a staunch ally of Jeremy Corbyn's, he's been speaking to the BBC over the weekend, and he said that basically Jeremy Corbyn has been misinterpreted and that Labour can sort this out very quickly. Now, John McDonnell is among many Labour MPs today, some allies of Corbyn, some not allies of Corbyn, who have said that the party should accept in toto the full International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance guidelines on anti-Semitism, so long as free speech is protected, so long as you can have a go at Israel, so long as you can criticise the state of Israel. While I was away on holiday, rabbis were coming out of the woodwork. Lord Sachs, the ex-chief rabbi, said that Corbyn must repent and recant. Gordon Brown, the former Chancellor and former Prime Minister, of course, said Labour has to act now or continue to undermine its values. Brown was speaking at a meeting of Jewish Labour MPs in London over the weekend. Now, since I've been away, we've had video after video after radio interview after speech of Corbyn 5 years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, speaking at pro-Palestinian events where he said something that his enemies have claimed to be anti-Israeli or anti-Jewish. So what's going on? It was a fascinating snippet I've got for you here. I downloaded this today, listening to BBC Radio 5 Live today, along with the usual cacophony of programmes that I do listen to in the mornings. Radio 5 Live are covering this today. Nicky Campbell found two Jewish women, or his producer did anyway, with opposing viewpoints. One supports Corbyn, the other one doesn't. Now, Naomi Wimborne Idrisi supports Corbyn. She found a Jewish voice for Labour. We'll hear from her in a couple of minutes' time. But first of all, we're going to hear from a young Labour activist called Ella Taylor-Fagan. Never heard of her. She's young. She was apparently a member of Oxford University Labour members or whatever. She's young. She's an activist, and she sees anti-Semites everywhere. She's Jewish as well. Somebody called Bruce Willis. Campbell asks her, how bad is anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? Ella Taylor-Fagan.
I think it's pretty bad, to be honest. And I think a good indicator of that is some of the abuse that I received from Labour Party members online yesterday after I tweeted about the conference. I think it's online. I've experienced it in person at the Oxford Labour Club. It's ever present, and I think that the time is now to start dealing with it. And I think it's a very significant issue, and I'm fed up of hearing that it's not, to be honest.
Where is this coming from? Is it, as Gordon Brown used the phrase, Gordon Brown described it, the conspiracy theory left, or is it broader than that?
I think we need to not pretend that this only exists on the left. I think Labour is not unique necessarily. I think it exists on the right. I get it from both sides.
No, but
online,
the conspiracy theory left is a specific phrase, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it truly exists, and I think I have kind of borne witness to it, and I think that is where it's coming from on the left. Absolutely, I think that's a brilliant way that he put it.
Nicky is brilliant. No challenge to young Ella Taylor-Fagan from BBC broadcaster Nicky Campbell. None. So what about Jewish woman Naomi Wimborne Idrisi? Then she's pro-Corbyn. Just again, in case you missed it, Naomi Wimborne Idrisi on Radio 5 Live today. She's pro-Corbyn, and she founded Jewish Voice for Labour. Here she is.
Anti-Semitism is a scourge that exists throughout society, along with other forms of racism. What really alarms me about this is that at a time of right-wing resurgence in this country and abroad, really dangerous, nasty, far-right stuff, we're focusing on Labour Party.
Some nasty far-left stuff as well, clearly, isn't there?
I beg your pardon, sorry?
Some nasty far-left stuff, clearly, as well, isn't there?
Well, look, I'm really sorry to hear that Ella has suffered. unpleasant social media attacks. That's unforgivable. And if there are Corbyn supporters who are responsible for that, then I find it reprehensible, and I would be queuing up to re-educate such people. However, we know, look, social media is rife with fake accounts and bots being used, and I'm afraid I've seen many of these where people join a pro-Corbyn Facebook page or something like that.
Let's put that just finally to Ella, because that's quite a thing to say. Ella Taylor-Fagan.
It's very serious.
Bots,
It's not
fake
only on
accounts.
this issue.
Ella, do you think some of it is ramped up by people causing mischief and making mischief? Because the likes of Gordon Brown don't seem to think that. The likes of John McDonnell doesn't seem to think that. Never mind the likes of Margaret Hodge. A quick comment on that, Ella.
Yeah, you see what Nicky Campbell did there? Loads of time for Ella Taylor, whatever her name is, the young Labour activist, to speak. She detests Corbyn and sees anti-Semites everywhere. But when a senior Jewish Labour political activist says, hang on a second, a lot of this stuff is coming from fake accounts designed to make Labour look bad, okay, people setting up accounts, maybe Corbyn's enemy, setting up fake accounts, going on to Facebook and joining Labour groups and then saying anti-Jewish things to make Corbyn look bad. So this is the senior Jewish woman. She says that. Campbell is having none of it, interrupts her. Proper presenter, of course, would have interrupted her and said, well, fake accounts, any proof? Naomi, give us some proof of that. But Campbell shut it down, stone dead. Why did he do that? So what does young Ella say then? Some of this stuff is bot-generated, double-agent stuff, as I said, people joining Labour groups online, specifically to deny the Holocaust, to make Labour look bad. What does the young Labour activist and presumably... Don't say it, Richie. What does Ella Taylor, and I've forgotten her name already, what did she say about it?
I think that's just a very strange thing to say, considering I've received this face-to-face. I've received it from councillors. I've received it from people with verified positions in the...
Who, though? You see, Campbell's got to jump in there and say, right, so you've received this anti-Semitic abuse from verified councillors, from other people. Who are they? Name them. Did you report them? Did you go to the police and make a complaint against them? Because that's the way it's supposed to work, you see. You can't just go on the radio and say, I'm Richie Allen. Every time I go down the street, I get personally abused. I get anti-Irish stuff. Or every time I meet councillors or politicians, I get anti-Irish stuff said to me. Who are these people? That's a fair question.
The party. I'd also like to say that it's not a race to the bottom. It's not who's more anti-Semitic, the left or the right. If it exists within our party, regardless of whether it exists more pertinently within the Conservative Party, we need to deal with it. So I absolutely reject that.
Thank you both very much indeed. It's 7:52.
And you heard the entire interview there. The minute the Jewish woman started to talk about fake accounts, which is a bit of a conspiracy theory, isn't it? Although probably a conspiracy fact. The minute she began to say, I wonder if a lot of this stuff saying nasty things about Israel and the Jews is actually by people trying to make Labour look bad and Corbyn look bad. Now, I'm no friend of Jeremy Corbyn. You know this. I don't defend Jeremy Corbyn or any politician or any party. But what's fair is fair and what's right is right. As soon as she said it, she was shut down. The young Jewish Labour activist who's anti-Corbyn and who believes anti-Semites are basically running around, you know, everywhere. You look under a mattress, you look under a mat, you look under a carpet, you'll find an anti-Semite. So she says, I get it personally from Labour councillors and activists. She's not asked to substantiate that. But Nicky Campbell is about as useful as tits on a bull. We've said that before. 16 minutes past the hour. Monday's programme, September 3rd, 2018. Here's a serious story. By the way, since I came on air, it's been reported that Peter Wilsman, who's a big supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, a big friend of his, a big backer of his, Wilsman suggested that Jewish Trump fanatics were behind accusations of anti-Semitism against Labour. Well, he's been re-elected to the party's ruling body, which will really piss off the leftist media here in the UK, and the snowflakes will be melting. Wilsman is one of 9 people elected to Labour's National Executive Committee. They tried to destroy him over his claims that Jewish Trump fanatics were behind these accusations of anti-Semitism, but the man endures, and he's been re-elected to the party's National Executive Committee. Moving on swiftly. Now, the Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, has been speaking to the media today, and he's been talking about child abuse. He said that he will not be afraid to take action against the tech giants, Facebook, Twitter. He didn't name any of them now. Presumably he means Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, the Google, of course, which is YouTube. He didn't name any, but he said he's going to take action against the tech giants if they don't help tackle child sexual abuse online. Javid said he was demanding that companies take more measures or they will face new legislation. He alleged that some companies were actually refusing to take down online abuse. And he said live streaming of child abuse was a growing problem. Right. So the tech giants, the ones I just mentioned, they've all said they are committed to tackling this issue. Javid said it was his personal mission to tackle this online abuse, saying that he's been impressed by some progress made by the tech giants. Now he wants to see the same level of commitment on child sexual exploitation. He said that the tech giants have done well on counter-terrorism. Now he wants them to show the same interest in tackling child sexual exploitation. Here's a little bit of what Home Secretary Sajid Javid said today.
To those who want to harm our children, let me say this. Do not think that you can satisfy your vile perversions from behind a computer screen or on a smartphone. Do not think you can hurt our children or support or encourage others to do so. Do not think that you will get away with it, because we will make sure that you don't. Our children deserve to have their innocence and their futures respected and protected, and to grow up without fear.
Right. Now, I don't know anything about Sajid Javid. I'm guessing on some human level, I believe he's a parent. He's probably distressed that paedophiles can operate with impunity online. It was alleged today that 80,000 paedophiles are operating in this country and are using the internet or the dark web or whatever. Now, I presume on some human level, this distresses Sajid Javid. That's fair to say. But the government, as a collective, and the people, the elites this government answers to, couldn't give a shite about tackling or catching child abusers. They couldn't, because they're surrounded by them. And we know this to be true. There is more about using... I reckon this is a lot to do with using the awful reality of online child abuse as an excuse to encroach further and further and further on our own individual freedoms, on our freedom to go online and to interact with people without having somebody looking over your shoulder all the time. Right? I'm not saying people are not using the internet to disseminate pictures of children and videos. Of course they are. What I'm saying is the establishment couldn't give a shite about it. How do I know that? Well, there wasn't a word from Sajid Javid or any of his colleagues in government today about individual responsibility at all. What about parental responsibility? Children wouldn't be in harm's way online all the time if they weren't online all the time, and if their parents knew when they were online and what they were doing when they were online. Now, this is a point made by a former guest of this programme, a woman called Marilyn Hawes. Remember her, dear listener? Nice woman, former teacher, and the founder of Freedom from Abuse. Like Marilyn, must get her back on the programme. She spoke with Sky News' Kay Burley today and made some sense. What about parental responsibility?
No child in a primary school should be on social media until they're 12 years old. You try and go to any primary school, the one I've been in today, 700 children, every one of them on social media. Who allows it? Who lets them buy the devices? You know, the tail doesn't wag the dog. There's a word called no. Yeah. And you have got to be more strident with your parenting. And I've found over the years, you know, when I was teaching and all of that parents are frightened of not being liked by their parents. This is about getting these children through the minefield of choppy waters where some serious harm can happen. And they
So you're saying that parents should just not allow their children to have computers in their bedrooms, full stop?
Webcams and devices in their bedroom, that's an absolute safety way, because if you knew what these girls were doing on their webcams, they wouldn't be doing it in their living room. You know, that's a very good block to put in place and still have your fun on the internet. But please do not talk to people online. Offline and online behaviour should be the same. You wouldn't talk to a stranger offline, don't talk to one online, because these people have got voice distorters and heavy disguise to make them sound like another 8-year-old or a 9-year-old when they could be 50.
When they could be 50. This is good stuff from Marilyn Hawes. Somebody said to me on this programme about 2 years ago that mobile phones and tablets are being used by parents as pacifiers or dummies, as we would say, or soothers. We would say soothers, wouldn't we, here in the UK? Pacifiers in America. Parents are up to their necks in it. They're up to their necks in it, parents. You know, each of them working a job to barely scrape by from week to week, then trying to entertain children in school holidays and on weekends even, when they don't have the money to do it and they're knackered, tired. It's a wonderful thing, the mobile phone and the tablet and the laptop. Sure, they'll be on there. Sure, they'll be on Facebook. Sure, no harm can come to them on Facebook. She said it, she goes into classrooms and the parents have no idea what they're being exposed to online. So Sajid Java can talk about getting the technical giants or the tech giants to do more to prevent stuff going on online, when this is very easily stopped and very easily dealt with. If you have a child, you should know at all times when your child is on the internet and what he or she is doing on the internet. Are they playing Candy Chaser or whatever the bloody game is called? Candy Crush? Or are they in some chat room somewhere talking to people who might be pretending to be 7 years old when, in fact, they might be 50? This is shit you should know as a parent. So don't be using these issues, which is what they're doing, as an excuse to say, we need to get involved. We need to find out more what people are doing online. It's the old adage, they've used it for years. You know, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have to worry about it. If you're just using the internet to speak to your friends, to tweet out some stuff, to get the football results, to read the news, well, you've got nothing to worry about then. Don't mind the fact that the police can look at what you're doing anytime that you're online. And it'll save us from paedophilia. But of course it won't save us from paedophilia. 25 minutes. It is past the hour. We're going to talk a bit of Brexit now in a minute. Don't whinge about it. Don't groan about it. It's very important we talk about this because it's all collapsing kind of in the manner and in the style that I kind of said it might. And I've not gotten a lot right over the years. No Nostradamus am I. But this is going exactly the way we thought it would go. Boris Johnson, the buffoon, the clown in chief at the Conservative Party, writing in the Telegraph today about the Chequers plan and how it's a nonsense and all of that. We're going to talk about that with former Junior Minister Edwina Curry, and she'll be with me in a couple of minutes' time. I'll tell you something, and I'll tell you no more. It's great to be back with you, it really is. Never thought I'd miss it as much as I did. This is your Richie Allen Show, live on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, TuneIn Radio, and triggerwarning.tv. Download the Trigger Warning app and the Cogent Radio app as well, back in about 90 seconds' time.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. they become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Welcome back to the programme then. Monday, September 3rd. I keep thinking about saying September 9th. It's the way it is on the computer in the bottom right-hand side of the screen there. September 3rd, the children are back to school today. God love them. At least those who go to school. Somebody said to me when I came back from my week-long holiday in Cornwall, somebody sent me an email to say that homeschool parents or parents who homeschool have been on British television in August. That makes sense, that. It's often the type of thing magazine shows do just in the run-up to the school year starting again. They do these human interest pieces. Apparently, homeschooling parents were brought on to programmes like Good Morning Britain and others, and they were given a torrid time of it. In effect, they were, basically given the runaround by aggressive presenters, trying to imply that it's somehow disadvantageous, can I say that, disadvantageous, or harmful to a child not to be schooled in school. We might talk about that in the week, right? We might just talk about that in the week. Alrighty. Right then, we're broadcasting live from South Manchester at 29 minutes past the hour. This is the Richie Allen Show. How are you? You well? I'm absolutely thrilled to be back. I'm not going to say that again, although I might a little bit later on. This is Simple Minds. Edwina Curry is next. Welcome back. Right, Simple Minds on the Richie Allen Show. It's 5:30, 29 minutes to the top of the hour. Monday's programme. Cut that song short so we get a few more seconds with my first guest. Mentioned at the top of the programme that Boris Johnson, the former Foreign Secretary, has been writing in today's Daily Telegraph that Theresa May's approach to Brexit, the Chequers plan, means disaster for the UK. Boris Johnson said the plan would hand the EU victory. The Prime Minister hit back today. Theresa May's official spokesman said there's no new ideas in what Boris Johnson had to say. Downing Street said the Prime Minister's blueprint for future relations with the EU, hammered out with cabinet members at her country residence in July, was deliverable and could win the support of the House of Commons. In a bizarre article, Boris Johnson invoked giant haystacks and Big Daddy, two wrestlers made famous in the 70s and 80s, or who were famous in the 70s and 80s here in the UK, and said that the inevitable outcome is a victory for the European Union. My first guest, an old friend of mine. It's been quite a while since I spoke with her. She's a former Junior Health Minister, former Conservative MP. She's a broadcaster and writer. It's always brilliant to speak with Edwina Curry. Edwina, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. And how are you?
I've never been better. This must be kind of nostalgic for you, this infighting and mayhem and madness. Takes you right back to the 90s.
Well, you're absolutely right, of course. And it doesn't do anybody any good. It certainly, I don't think it does Boris Johnson any good. If he came out to where I live up near Manchester and he chatted to people up here, members of the party, he'd find that we do not approve of this kind of disloyal, rude and rather aggressive behaviour. We think this is not it doesn't demonstrate the sort of qualities we want in a leader. And I think, to be honest, I think that's what it's all about. I think he's interested in becoming leader of the Tory party. He thinks there's going to be a vacancy in the next 10 months or a year or so. And do you know what, Richie? He is probably going to be wrong.
I can't argue with any of that. I think he's certainly motivated by selfishness and by his own, projected career path. I have no doubt you're right about that. I must point out, by the way, for listeners who don't know, Edwina voted to remain. I voted for the UK to leave. I voted against Nice and, of course, Lisbon in Ireland, but that was reversed. Look, what I like about you, Edwina, is you campaigned for the country to remain in the European Union, but you believe that the result of the vote must be honoured, and that we must leave. Now, forget all of Johnson's histrionics. Isn't he fundamentally right, even selfish as he might be, that May's plan is basically leaving, is not leaving, it's staying in all but name? He's right there, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, my judgment on it, I read the whole of the Chequers paper. There's lots and lots of good stuff in there. The main sticking point, Richie, is about trading goods, which actually is a fairly small amount of what we buy and sell overseas. Most of what the UK deals in is services like insurance and banking and a whole host of things. The trading goods it's not small beer, but it is much smaller for us than it is for many countries. And the row, obviously, is about how goods are going to cross the border, and how we are going to do this. Now, my impression, and it's just an impression, is that perhaps what we call the Sherpas, the civil servants who do the hard work, the Sherpas in Downing Street had gone to see the Sherpas in Brussels and said, can we together see if we can get together a program for doing this? And that's how they cooked up this whole idea of, well, Britain will collect all the taxes due, all the tariffs due, and if stuff is then moving on into Europe, we can deduct it and pay you a rebate. I never thought this was going to be a goer, and I'll tell you why. Why would another country want you collecting their taxes?
Yeah.
I mean, even if they trusted you to do it properly, would they trust you to hand it over? It looked like a cobbled-together plan. Probably, to my mind, not really a goer. But do you know what, Richie? This is all about a deal. If Brussels wants it, and it would effectively, I think Johnson has a point, I think it would effectively keep us in the customs union. If Brussels wants it, Brussels has got to say yes and grab it. Because if Brussels doesn't do their part of it, if they don't actually come up with a deal, then we're out next March, and we will trade on WTO terms.
Which are not bad. It's not a bad thing, Edwina. Much has been made of this in the media. It's not a bad thing. I mean, if we were to leave with no deal and defer to World Trade Organization trading terms, the EU would be obliged to give us the same deal that they've recently given Canada. They would have no choice.
If we trade on WTO terms, we'll see tariffs of about 3%. The amounts are fairly small for most manufactured goods, and that's because they've been negotiated down over a very long period of time. And that would mean that if you remember, of course, the pound has fallen since before Brexit, and it's fallen by about 10%. So actually, our goods, our exports, look quite cheap in many countries. Plus, we've been dealing with all the paperwork every time we send something to India. Every time we send something to America, every time we send something to China, and you'd be surprised how much we do export to these countries. Every time we send something to South Africa, which is where the Prime Minister was last week, and by absolute coincidence, I didn't plan it, I was there at the same time, and there people were very interested in what the Prime Minister was talking about and doing good deals. I think
so. Let me ask you this then. This is good stuff. Let me ask you this: is the problem then that to her core, Theresa May and many of the cabinet, many cabinet members are staunch Europhiles? And this is the problem because let me just finish that question. Let me just finish before, and then you have the floor. Let me finish. I ask you that because, yes, if you take everything at face value, and we take everything to be real. Of course, it's great to see the Prime Minister in Africa and in other countries talking about potential trade deals. That's very positive. So if May was committed to leaving and to delivering on the result of June 2016 and leaving properly, she would tell the European Union and Michel Barnier to go and eat your hat. We will leave now. We won't have any more of this nonsense where you keep saying you don't agree to this and you don't agree to that, and you're basically what the European Union is doing is basically running the clock down, which is, as far as I can see it anyway. So May should say right now, well, look, to hell with that. We're leaving, that's the end of it. We'll go with no deal, and I'll do these trade deals that you talked about there.
Yeah, well, first of all, she's an honourable woman. Honourable to a fault. And I don't think she's trying to do any kind of conspiracy. I don't think that's happening at all. She's well aware that business wants to get a deal, if at all possible. That the business that trades from Britain to Europe wants to get a deal. The business that trades from Britain to the rest of the world is fine. They're already where we need to be. But there'll be a certain amount of disruption, and that's not welcome. Of course it isn't. If we can have a smooth transition, that would be very helpful indeed. But my own feeling again, Richie, is that as we get closer to the date of leaving, it will dawn on Brussels that they're losing one of Europe's biggest donors. And the only countries that are waiting to join the EU, like Albania, will be recipients. They'll have their hands out. And so it makes sense for Brussels actually to try and do a deal with us and for us to be paying our dues. What we're facing at the moment is, everybody uses the metaphor of crashing out, leaving without a deal. But if we leave without a deal, then we take our money with us, and that's worth a great deal. So don't be surprised if, in the weeks in the run-up to our leaving, in other words, after Christmas maybe, we find that there's a scramble from Brussels to settle some issues with us. I think that's what will happen, and I think we'll end up with something that's better than anything that's on the table at the moment.
Good stuff, because you'd have to imagine the major food and beverage manufacturers in Europe, Edwina, you'd have to imagine the major car manufacturers, they'd be holding a knife to the throats of Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron, saying, listen, we export more to the UK than the UK sells to us. Don't go screwing this up here. You'd imagine they must be threatening the leaders of their countries. I mean, Macron seemed to acquiesce a bit last week. I was away on holidays. He seemed to be saying, or at least seemed to be saying, look, let's just do a deal and give them, most of what they want. What do you think?
Well, Macron and France has always been rather protectionist. Whatever the rules say, you try working in France as a doctor, you try working in France as a builder, you try working in France as a banker. If you aren't French, don't speak French, and only have foreign qualifications. They're very, very protectionist, is France, and a number of other countries. Greece is another example. Italy is another. So, the rhetoric is well ahead of the actual practice on the ground. You're right about manufacturers in countries like Germany. Bear in mind, of course, that we can make everything, the cars and so on, in Britain. Most of what we make here is exported. That's how free trade actually works. And there will probably be some adjustments based on exchange rates as much as, and prosperity of your customers, as much as on any written paper and any trade deals. What we will benefit from, and which is quite exciting, is the idea that we can source our food wherever we want it, because the EU is very protectionist on food. If we can source it wherever we want it, we may find in the UK that we get a much better deal. In fact, that our prices are much lower. I think that's much of what was going on when Theresa was in South Africa. We import a lot of fruit. We import a lot of flowers. We do great trade with places like South Africa and Kenya on primary produce, and we'd like to see more of that in future. And if it keeps prices down in our supermarkets, you know what? Could mean the Tories do quite nicely at the next election. Yeah, and we all want that, don't we? Not. Well, listen, I gave up on democracy years ago. I'm one of those who doesn't vote and sits from the sidelines saying it's all rigged. You might remember me saying that to you and arguing with you about that on television in London a few years ago. Look, what I like about what you're saying is the people voted to leave, and that vote must be honoured. Now, one of the things you're not doing, which I like, is you're not saying that the people didn't know what they were voting for. I want to talk about Corbyn, the Labour Party, and anti-Semitism in a second. I want to move away from Brexit. But you're not saying that the people were thick as pig shite, as we might say in my country. You're not saying they didn't understand it, right? They did understand it. I mean, David Cameron and George Osborne and everybody made it perfectly clear that if you voted to leave, it meant leaving. It meant leaving the single market and the customs union. Not everybody who voted to leave was some sort of Neanderthal, racist. People wanted to... You're quite right. 33 million people voted. It was a higher turnout than it had been in the previous year's general election. Many people voted on emotion. Other people voted on philosophy, on history, on culture, and a number of people voted on statistics and forecasts as well. You know, anybody that loses a vote has a bad habit of assuming that the other side were idiots. Well, they weren't always idiots, and you have to understand why people voted in the way that they did. Many older people voted to leave because they remember a time, indeed as I do, when we were not in the EU, and they didn't like being told what to do and treated with disdain by Brussels. And they are prepared to take that risk. Now, I don't think we should have a second referendum. I think if you start playing around like that, then you can never trust a single vote. I think government has to carry it out. What Jeremy Corbyn's trying to do is straddle both fences. He's basically trying to bring down the government. If I were in his shoes, I'd probably be doing much the same thing. But sadly, he's probably not going to get the opportunity. The next general election is scheduled for 2022. We'll be well out of the EU by then, and we'll be seeing how we get on with it. And I think we'll be quite prosperous by then. I think we'll see a tremendous surge of activity, a business activity, which will put paid to much of his worries about austerity and much of the vote gaining that he gets from that virtue signalling.
Good stuff. Final question on Brexit. So even though you are a Remainer at heart, do you accept that whatever deal Theresa May and her government does with Brussels, free movement of people continuing is untenable? It's untenable to those who voted to leave. Do you accept that?
Well, it doesn't mean that we would have no movement. This is what the confusion is about. The UK Parliament would regain the right to decide who crosses the borders and under what circumstances. But we accept that we relied very heavily on people from other countries, including the EU, who come and work in all sorts of activities here, from the care services up to computers. Wherever we lack skills or wherever we need people to assist us, then young people particularly are coming in from overseas to do that job, and we can't manage without them. That said, we need to regularise their status. People from the EU will not be able to come in as freely before. The corollary of that, of course, is that British citizens living in other countries in the EU need their status regularised as well. I don't think that's a problem. I really don't. It just means that we will have more control in the UK. And I think most people now, there's been intense debate about immigration in the last 2 years. Intense, it's still going on. Most people recognise that we need our immigrants, but we need to make sure that they're here for the right reasons and actually contributing to the economy.
Absolutely, not driving down wages and making living and working conditions more difficult for the indigenous population. That goes for everywhere around the world. I agree with that. Listen, on Jeremy Corbyn, look, I'm a champagne socialist. My listeners know full well that I believe that the workers should own the means of production. I know you're a free market capitalist. You'll bash me for saying that, but that's what I believe, and all of that. And it's great that we can bounce ideas off one another. But still, I don't like Jeremy Corbyn. I don't find him sincere. You've identified there an area where he isn't sincere on the European Union. He's railed against and been critical of and campaigned against the European Union for years. Now that it suits him, he's straddling the fence that you said. However, having bashed Corbyn for weeks and months on this programme, where I do have a bit of sympathy with him is on the anti-Semitism story, which the Conservative Party, understandably, maybe I would do it myself if I was in politics, are making great mileage out of this. I don't see how anything that Jeremy Corbyn has done in the past, and I have no sympathy with the government of Israel. You probably would have guessed that, Edwina. I also have no sympathy or time for hateful racists who, see Jews as, well, if you're Jewish, well, you must go along with what's going on in Israel and you're to blame for it. That's all nonsense as well. What I've seen over the years with Corbyn is somebody who's just very, very pro-Palestinian, doesn't like the Israeli government, has never made any secret of that. I don't see any endemic anti-Semitism or any endemic hatred for Jews. I don't see it. That's me personally. What do you think?
Well, there are several things I can add to that. The first is that I've known Corbyn since we both entered Parliament together on the same day, along with another 100 or so more MPs, back in 1983. He is not very bright. He's very narrow-minded. You know, he wouldn't argue with you. He certainly wouldn't give me the time of day. There are other Labour members, other socialists that I got on with well, who recognised I came from a working-class background, who were almost encouraging, shall we say. They used to say I was in the wrong party, but can't have everything, and who were very helpful. And Corbyn was not one of those. He comes from a much wealthier background than me. He comes from a Marxist, communist, purist background. Do you know what I mean? It's not a practical one. He chose his causes 40, 50 years ago, and he's always stuck with them, however irrational and contradictory they may have been. I hear what you say about his attitude to Israel and all the rest of it. I come from the Jewish community. I've got many, many contacts in the Orthodox Jewish community, and they are absolutely horrified. Many of them who voted Labour are very, very upset. It's not so much that Corbyn himself is an anti-Semite. It's that he hasn't stopped anti-Semitism becoming rife at various levels in the party. And I think there are two reasons for that. First of all, because he's mistakenly labouring under the idea that perhaps that's what Muslims want and that he can go for the Muslim vote. And there are 5 million Muslims in Britain and only 250,000 Jews. That is a huge mistake, huge mistake. And also, there is a difference between Israel and the Jewish community. That is correct. But the word Zionist links them both. And the word Zionist has become a meme for Jewish. So if you're anti-Zionist, you have to look very carefully at exactly what people are saying and what they mean. There's a but though.
There's a but there. Let me jump in there because this is fascinating now talking to you because I'm getting hundreds of tweets, which I'm not going to be reading. So I don't want to waste the time. We've only got another 10 minutes together, you and I don't want to waste that, with your permission, of course.
Go ahead.
Wonderful thing about you over the years is, you see, I've had tweets already. Bollocks to Curry. She's a free market capitalist. She let in all the immigrants and drive down wages and all that. What I love about that is you have no problems taking the slings and arrows of public debate. You will debate anybody. I've debated you over the years. You know, you won't remember, you've had millions of interviews over the years. We've debated on, socialism against free market capitalism, all these sorts of issues. You'll talk to anybody. What we're getting today is, you brought it up there, this Zionist thing. You see, what cheeses me off about that is, I know you can disagree with this all night long and I will shut up and I will not interrupt you. I don't like Zionism, and I don't think Zionist or a Zionist is a nice thing to be. I think it's racist. I think it's fundamentally racist. Now, I might be wrong, I might be right, but I should be able to talk about that without people melting down and screaming that. I mean, some of this stuff is hysterical. Allegedly, Jews are thinking about leaving the country. I don't believe that, Edwina. I don't believe, and I'll tell you why. You know all about this city, Manchester. I've got contacts and friends in North Manchester, Jewish business people, some of whom make television programmes with me every now and then, and they say they do not recognise this. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, it's terrible to be a Jew. They just don't believe it. Now, back to you.
Well, all I can tell you is whenever I visit friends or go and have lunch with somebody, North London, Manchester, wherever, it's the first subject that everybody mentions. Are you frightened? Or indeed, the way they put it is, aren't you frightened, Edwina? Now, as you just described, I'm not easily frightened. I tell you what, you grow up in Liverpool as a Tory.
Yeah, not the place to be a Tory. I'll give you that, yeah. Go ahead.
Not easily put up, believe me. And on Twitter, if I get abuse, I either mock them, in other words, I share it and say, look at the people who are opposed to me, what idiots, or I block them, and that's how I deal with it. It's not a problem for me, because I agree with you. I think we have to engage. I think we have to share views. I think we have an absolute obligation to try and understand the other person's point of view. My father was not a Zionist. He thought the whole idea of the State of Israel was a great big romantic idea, and that was not the future for the Jewish people. On the other hand, the people who had escaped from, who had been released from the camps, the people who had escaped from Europe, from the horror and the atrocities of the Nazi regimes, and not only the Nazis, of course, there were others, like in Hungary and so on, where these things, terrible things happened. They needed a place where they felt safe. And the Labour Party back in the 1940s was a huge supporter. Absolutely. They saw us as part of their obligation. And the first Zionists, they were all socialists to their fingertips. You can't find anything more socialist than a kibbutz. So, there are different ways of looking at these things. Modern Israel is a rather different place, but I have cousins who've gone to live there because they don't feel safe in Bournemouth. How about that? It's...
What are they frightened of, Edwina? What would they be frightened of? I want to dig down into this because, again, look, there's always been idiots who hate or despise or who sneer at, whether it be Muslims, whether it be Jews, whether it be... We've always had that. I've always liked historically, I've been a journalist for over 20 years. What I've always liked is when it's in daylight. When you can talk to people about stuff openly, whether it's on air, whether it's not, whether it's at a hustings, whether it's at a town meeting. Well, why do you think like that? What I'm really worried about is that this hysteria that we've seen in recent months is being drummed up by what I would call staunch, very right-wing Zionists who want to use it to frame...
Here you're wrong.
Why am I wrong?
Well, because much of the criticism of Jeremy Corbyn doesn't come from you, and it doesn't come from me. It comes from some members of his own party. Frank Field, who's been in the House of Commons, longer than I did, 1979 he's been in the Commons, has just resigned, citing anti-Semitism in the party, or the failure to stop anti-Semitism in the party as one of his concerns. He's also cited the increase in bullying and aggression, this gentler kind of politics that Corbyn has been talking about is not reflected in the behaviour of some of the people in Momentum. The efforts to get more moderate MPs out of their seats, the deselection processes that are underway. This reminds a lot of us of the 1970s and 80s, where eventually Neil Kinnock had to get a grip and put an end to it. But if you combine the two things, if you combine that anti-Semitism flowing around, some of which you've identified in those tweets, and if you, with that element of thuggery that seems to be going on in the Labour Party, you've got a Labour Party that seems to be heading for running the country for office with some extremely unhappy ideas accepted and condoned and allowed. And people allowed in the party who say the most offensive things, like Ken Livingstone. And that's not a comfortable place to be.
Edwina, what did Ken say?
Your parents were liberated from Auschwitz.
You see, I would agree that some of the behaviour exhibited by some of those associated with Momentum is dreadful. You use the word Marxist, but this is a very... I can't, off the top of my head, find the language to describe this sort of behaviour. Thuggery is one way to describe it. This complete intolerance of the ideas of others. But it's not even the intolerance of other people's ideas. It's then attempting to shut that person down, to marginalise them, and to try and disappear them. That's dreadful. I don't conflate that with this anti-Semitism thing. I really don't. I'm worried about it, Edwina, because I'm more than a critic of Israel. I mean, if somebody made me King Solomon tomorrow, I wouldn't kick Israel out of the country or kick Israel out of the Middle East. I would not. I don't agree with how Israel came to be. I don't agree with what Israel does. I believe it is a racist state. The government, that is, not necessarily Israelis, but successive governments. These are things I feel very strongly. But I'm happy for you to argue with me and tell me why I'm wrong. That's the way I came up. That's how I came up in the media. Well, I'm worried that this hysteria, which I see it as being, is being drummed up to shut down genuine, proper criticism of the crimes of the state of Israel. That's just my take on it. But going back to what you were saying about Momentum and all this, I totally agree with that. And I don't like where that's going. We see this on social media. I see you've been blocked by journalists from The Guardian because of your opinions. I mean, this is madness, the level we're descending to, isn't it?
Oh, well, you're quite right. I have been blocked by Owen Jones.
Owen Jones, wow.
actually in my profile on Twitter because I regard that as a badge of honour. Well, we're going to see tomorrow. There is, I gather, a Labour NEC National Executive Committee meeting, and they will be taking a vote on the definition of anti-Semitism. And we'll see. If they do not accept the internationally accepted definition, then they're not going to restore confidence in their intelligence and their compassion and their understanding with the general public, and particularly with the Jewish community. Jewish community is absolutely aghast at what has been happening in the Labour Party.
And yet I don't see it. You see it, and I don't doubt you. I don't doubt you're telling the truth. You've always been honest in any interview I ever see you doing over the years. I believe you're hearing that. But I'm not hearing it. And there are thousands of Jews, including Jewish Voice for Labour and others, who are going public and saying, no, this is not right. Let me just talk briefly about by the way, anytime you want to leave, by the way, you can leave. I know we said we'd only do a half an hour. Edwina Curry's our guest this Monday evening. She was due to go now, Edwina. Edwina, maybe we'll finish on this. I'll tell you why I've got a problem with this IHRCA definition of anti-Semitism. Because it wants to criminalise somebody comparing the behaviour of the IDF and the behaviour of Netanyahu's government with the Nazis. Well, I'm sorry, but on occasion, if the cap fits, you have to wear it. And if you don't like it, well, you can either do something about it and stop murdering Palestinians on the Gaza border. Stop shelling them from airplanes whenever you feel like it every 2 or 3 years and killing children. And then people might not make the analogy with Nazism. I can understand why Jews, maybe your family, Edwina, maybe your friends, maybe some of my friends, they might say, Richie, maybe don't use that word, Richie? Go ahead.
Richie,
go ahead.
because I do have to, you're absolutely right. All I can say is that you don't actually walk in their shoes. There's been a lot of discussion about under what circumstances people are upset or offended about all sorts of things. If we're able to understand why people are upset or offended, whoever they are, whatever the case, whatever the circumstance, we have to walk in their shoes. And to make comparisons with the Nazi regime. Have you ever been to Auschwitz?
I was in Dachau. It's dreadful. I can't imagine it. Yeah. Yeah.
You stand in the hall where those gas chambers are.
Have you ever been in Gaza, Edwina?
I don't think they'd let me into Gaza, to be honest, but I've been in.
And I'm not being sarcastic now. I love talking to you. I love having you on. I hope you'll come back in the future. I'm not being sarcastic or cheap when I ask you that. It's a fair question.
No,
I've not been to. Have you been to Gaza and tried to live the way they have to live?
Well, that is an absolutely fair question. I have met and talked with Palestinian politicians, particularly on a visit that I paid back in the early 90s when Rabin was the Prime Minister of Israel. I admired him enormously, and we were able to talk freely. I went with the British High Commissioner there. And ambassador, and yes, we had many discussions, and I'd share with you the view that the best chance of peace we had under Rabin, who was, of course, assassinated by one of his own people. That's sometimes what happens. As we know from Ireland and Northern Ireland, peace only comes when both sides want it, and at the moment that's not the case. And a great deal of what happens, and a great deal of the way people from the Palestinians feel, 70 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, 70 years on, still not accepted that the State of Israel is a legitimate country, even though most other countries do. That's being whipped up by people who are using these poor people as pawns, in my view. But that, my darling, is a story for another day, because I have to go.
Listen, it was good to catch up with you. We'll agree to disagree on that last sentiment. Thanks for coming back on, Edwina. Enjoyed speaking with you. EdwinaCurry.co.uk, by the way, is Edwina's website. Check it out there, and I hope you'll come back again in the future.
Okay.
Good to hear from you. Cheers, Edwina. Thanks a lot. Bye for now. Edwina Curry, former Junior Health Minister, broadcaster and author, live on Monday's Richie Allen Show. Yeah, I mean, obviously Twitter is aflame. There's a cliche now for a Monday with all sorts of opinions. Look, my opinion on the state of Israel and the Israeli government has been expressed even 1,500 to maybe 1,000, maybe 10,000 times over the last 4 years. It's an illegitimate state. It has no right to legitimacy, in my opinion. Its only claim to legitimacy it's a dubious claim. Number one, it's in the Bible. And number two, we've got international recognition, as Edwina said at the end. It doesn't have international recognition, not on the scale that it thinks it has. And to claim that it was a promise by God to Abraham himself is just patently bollocks. The creation of the state of Israel was illegal. It has no legitimacy. It shouldn't be there. But if somebody gave me the wand in the morning to solve it, I wouldn't kick out the Israelis out of that country. I'm not going to dwell on this. I've said this 1,000 times, what I would do. I would create the state of Israel and the state of Palestine side by side, pre-67 borders, right of return for the Palestinians. That's what I would do, given the magic wand. The behaviour of the Israeli government since the creation of the state of Israel has been behaviour that can justifiably be compared to the behaviour of the Nazis. It's like I said earlier on, if the cap fits. And nobody should adopt the IHRCA, the International Holocaust Remembrance, whatever it's called, definition of anti-Semitism, because they want to criminalise comparing the behaviour or the crimes of the Israeli government with the Nazis. But what the Israeli government does to the Palestinians is exactly the fucking same as what was done to Jews in Nazi Germany. It's the same. It's the same. Starving them, gassing them, murdering them, stealing their land. Right? I'm not going to go on a mega rant about this. But that's what it is. I've no time for Jeremy Corbyn or the Labour Party. I have less time for the Conservative Party. But what's right is what's right. There isn't an endemic issue with anti-Semitism in England, let alone Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland. There's no evidence to support it. As some of you have been tweeting, and I asked her, what are they frightened of? It's bullshit. Jews have nothing to be frightened of in this country. Nothing. Well, I just don't see any evidence of it. The campaign against anti-Semitism, that bunch of motherless muppets. Crimes against Jews are on the rise. No, they aren't. Official figures show it's going the other way. Nobody cares whether you're Jewish, Sikh, Christian. It doesn't matter to most people. Yes, there are muppets who probably do shout nasty things at Jews. They're the same dickheads who'll shout stuff at Sikhs, who'll shout stuff at somebody wearing a hijab. Listen, we'll always invite people on this programme that we disagree with. Always. I've been speaking with Edwina for years, and I like her, because she means what she says, even if I think she's wrong. I'll always invite the other side of it on. I'm not always successful because it's not always easy to get the other side to come on, especially in this age of narcissism. That's what I like about Edwina Curry and Anne Widdecombe. They'll talk to anybody, regardless of what your opinion is. They'll say, well, I'll argue with you, which we're losing day by day by day by day in this descent into identity politics and narcissism. I'll only speak to those who agree with me. Never. So long as we can get people on this show who disagree with us, we'll continue to do it at 6 minutes past the hour. And it's the Richie Allen Show, and it's time for a quick break. Michael Rivera will be live from Oahu in Hawaii in a couple of minutes' time. You don't want to miss that. While we get him on, we'll have a quick break. In fact, when I come back from that, we'll have 1 or 2 comments from you on Twitter as well.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structure and application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Right, welcome back. Let me read a couple of tweets before we get Michael Rivero live from Oahu in Hawaii. Monday's programme, what is it? Is it 8 minutes past, 8.5 minutes past the hour? Let me read a few of those comments there. Hi to Base Ninja. How you doing, mate? Richie, to be fair, the Nazis did that to everyone. I don't hear anti-politism, do we? We don't hear anti-politism, do we? Or anti-allied forces-ism either. That's a good point there. I like that. Lord Twat Waffle. Good evening. Apparently British Jews are scared to live in Bournemouth and then will claim to be scared living in the Middle East too. Why move to a war zone from the peaceful south coast of England? Look, I asked Edwina. I said, look, what are they frightened of? She didn't answer me. But I don't doubt for a minute that some Jews have said to Edwina was born into a Jewish family, Jewish lady. I have no doubt that some Jews have said, oh, we're scared. I have no doubt that some of them will say that. But when challenged to explain what it is you are scared of or what they are scared of, I would imagine they would find it difficult to articulate that. Look, before I went away on holidays, I had a right good laugh at some woman whose name escapes me now. She's Jewish and she's written several articles, one for the Telegraph and one for the Daily Mail and one for the Express in the last 2 years, saying that I'm going to be forced out of my country. And it's like, Christ, a year ago you wrote an article saying I'm going to be forced out. Now a year later you're writing an article saying I'm going to be forced out. Over what? Who's coming for you? Nobody is the answer. There are people who disagree with you. There are people who disagree with Zionism. There are people like me who think to be a Zionist is not a nice thing to be. To be a Zionist is to be a racist and a fascist. I will say that forever. Nobody's going to stop me saying that. And I'm not important. Hi to Derek, who says, it's great to have guests that you don't agree with. Thank you, Derek. Nick tweets, though. And Nick looks like one of those accounts that is not really real. He tweets, Richie sold out? ? Why? Because I interviewed somebody who we don't agree with? Have I sold out because I've had a Conservative politician on the programme? When George Galloway was on, did I sell out? When Nigel Farage was on, did I sell out? Talk to everybody. Let everybody have their say. Sean tweets, bollocks curry. Good to hear from the horse's mouth the ingrained beliefs. Yes, but they are her beliefs, Sean. This is the thing. Don't be like, I'm not saying this to you now, Sean. Don't be like these momentum snowflakes that we have to throw bile and hatred at those we fundamentally disagree with, because I'll tell you why. You have to live with those people. They're your neighbours and your friends. What are you going to do? Pull the blinds down over your house, lock the doors, and only let people in whom agree with you, and never challenge or speak with those who don't. Jim tweets that he enjoyed listening to Edwina Curry, enjoyed that interview. Thank you, Jim. Hi to Tiger. Edwina has spoken to Palestinians. That sorted it then, he said. Monumental bollocks. And so on. Lot of tweets on that. A number of you were happy that I asked her had she been to Gaza. It's one thing to go to Auschwitz, Go to Gaza. Yes, Auschwitz is a house of horrors. Dachau is a house of horrors. Horrible places where unspeakable things were done to people. Many of them Jewish people. Unspeakable things. Tell you what, Gaza is where unspeakable things are being done to Palestinian men, women and children today. Today. Not in the 1930s. Right. Yeah, right, there you are now. Said I wouldn't rant. And then, well, I ranted. Going to take some music. Then we're going to dial up Michael Rivero, who's in Oahu in Hawaii. This is Monday's Richie Allen Show. And I'm trying to get a song there. I've got it. It's a bit of Percy Sledge. Why not have a bit of Percy Sledge on your radio show, I say? Back with Mike Rivero after this and more of your comments as well. I've always liked that version, Percy Sledge and Try a Little Tenderness on the Richie Allen Show. 16 minutes past the hour for Monday's programme. It's that time of the month again. I've been away for a few weeks, as you know. But we take a monthly visit to the beautiful island of Oahu in Hawaii and speak to Michael Rivero, top man. Check out whatreallyhappened.com. Brilliant journalist, writer and broadcaster. Always good to speak with Mike. Mike, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Well, thanks for doing it. Thanks for doing it short notice. Always good to be with you. Lot going on, Mike.
Oh, yeah.
I think we mentioned this late in July, the last time we spoke, mid-July. This might be the first year that we never had a silly season where things just became so dull and boring that there was nothing to talk about. It's like there's something in the air, Mike. It feels like we're building up to something. What do you think?
Yeah, it does, and we're seeing all of this conflict around the world is building up. We're seeing all these red warning flags about the economy. We're seeing our civilization literally coming apart at the seams with all of this political correct insanity, and we should be worried about all the wars our nation is starting and the economy rather than which bathroom we're supposed to be using. But it does feel like our society is coming apart. We're seeing all this violence in the streets from Antifa, and even worse, we're seeing the corporate media protecting for them and covering for them and saying, really, it's okay for them to be behaving like this.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up Antifa. I read an article. I've got it here, Mike. I should have. No, I'm not. I'm not surprising you with this. I could have sent you this today, but it was an article written by. Oh, it's gone now. Anyway, it was to do with the levels of violence being displayed by these so-called anti-fascists that are, turning up at whether it could be a small gathering of whether it's liberals, whether it's conservatives, and they want to talk about this or talk about that or talk about immigration or whatever. And increasingly, these types of events are being not only trolled by, but visited by violent men hiding behind balaclavas, often bringing weapons with them. We're seeing it here in the UK, but the media doesn't seem to want to talk about it, doesn't want to seem to write about it or know anything about it. How serious is it in the US, Mike, this Antifa movement?
It's fairly serious. I mean, it's not widespread yet. The problem is we have our own political leadership is now encouraging this kind of behavior. You've got people like Maxine Waters who are out there literally making speeches saying that liberals need to physically confront conservatives and, drive them out of restaurants. Basically, if you see them at the shopping mall, you just harass them. And this is like real brown shirt tactics that are being encouraged.
Yeah, we're seeing it here. The article I was looking for was an article written for The Spectator by Lionel Shriver, the author, of course, and journalist. And it's a brilliant piece entitled "Millennials Aren't Taking Offence, They're Hunting for Victims."
Yes.
And this is about identity politics and the attempt to shut down real debate, real political discourse, and to identify what's right. But basically what these people want to do is they want to say, well, look, here is the right version of everything. If you're not preaching that, you can be attacked. And in her article, she's basically saying that increasingly, this is moving from trying to destroy people's careers online, ridicule them, get rid of them effectively. It's now moving towards violence as well, and we're seeing this more and more and more.
We certainly are here, and that's exactly what it is. They're out there basically going around saying that anybody who has a point of view that doesn't match up with the liberal agenda, they're offensive. And because they're offensive, they should be shut down. And forget about that First Amendment right to freedom of speech. You know, you can't say things that offend people. The problem with that, of course, is that you can't have freedom of speech and an offense-free society. The two don't go together. When you're out there expressing your particular point of view, there's going to be somebody out there who's not going to like it. And part of the liberal identity is to always be offended about anything that doesn't support the liberal agenda, and to scream racist and sexist and just act like a bunch of crybabies in hopes of stifling any real discussion. But that's the real goal, is to end any public debate about what's going on in Washington, D.C., or with the wars or the globalist agenda.
Yeah, and they're creating new minority groups, Mike, almost on a daily basis. They're inventing new groups of people that need to be protected from anything that might cause them to fall rolling around in a fit because they were offended. And again, this is going unchallenged. You don't have to talk about this if you don't want, but on the right to express an opinion against the right to be offended, do you have an opinion on the Alex Jones issues that he has with some of the Sandy Hook families? I should preempt that by saying I interviewed Wolfgang Halbig a number of times over the years. I know you know all about Wolfgang. I was very interested in what Wolfgang had to say, being a former Florida State trooper, being a former National School Safety Inspector. Now, like any decent presenter, and you're an excellent presenter, Mike, at every juncture, I challenged Wolfgang to provide some evidence, to provide some facts, and I pointed out that there was another point of view, that there were others who believed he was wrong, and that there were families who were saying that they were offended. Now, I think that's behaving responsibly as a journalist, but I also think that people had a right to hear that Wolfgang Halbig was saying this stuff. How do you juxtapose Alex Jones and what he was doing around Sandy Hook and the rights of the families to say that this was horribly offensive, so much so that Jones has to be censored in some way? Do you have a thought on it, Mike?
Well, basically, they're trying to come up with a reason to sue Alex Jones into silence. It's a practice we're seeing in the United States that's called lawfare, which is find a reason to sue somebody, and even if you can't win the lawsuit, you can drive them into bankruptcy with the legal costs. And the reality is, I've had Wolfgang on my show, and he makes a very compelling case that, in fact, the entire Sandy Hook incident was a complex hoax to push the gun grabber agenda. And if Wolfgang is right, then there really aren't any families to be offended, because they're all actors and actresses and people around there who mysteriously got their mortgages all paid off after it was all over. So as far as I'm concerned, he's made the case. Things are not what we're being told there. And Wolfgang, of course, under the First Amendment, has a right to express his opinion. Now, where Alex Jones may have erred, and I haven't been listening to everything he's been saying, Alex sometimes gets a little over the top. He's a little bombastic. At the point where he starts saying the parents are lying or engaged in a fraud, that actually does become defamatory. And it does open him up to a lawsuit. And Jones, for all of his success in the independent media, he's now under attack from all sides. He needed to be perhaps be a little more responsible as a journalist, not just as a citizen with the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, but as a journalist. Because anytime you speak truth to power, you're going to be a target, and you have to be very, very careful that you don't just open the door to a frivolous lawsuit. Now, I understand that Wolfgang Halbig and Alex Jones' trial is in front of a jury. And as long as Wolfgang gets to make his case before that jury, I'm pretty sure he's going to convince them that something is wrong with the official government story. And we're dealing in this era where people are still remembering how the government lied to us all about Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. And so they're not going to give the government the benefit of the doubt in this.
This is good stuff, Mike. because Wolfgang, I always felt Wolfgang Halbig, because of his background, was entitled to say, I find this story very bizarre and very disturbing, which is what he did do. I mean,
yes.
You did one of the first interviews with him back in late 2012, early 2013. It would have been early 2013. I had him on TV in London around about that time. And I got a lot of stick for really grilling him, you know, because we know that false flags happen. We know that rogue agents of governments do terrible things and try to make it look like a third party did it to further an agenda. We know that. But we also know that they don't always do it. And that even with the best of intentions, Wolfgang might have gotten it wrong, or he might have gotten it right, but he might have described it wrong. Maybe children did die. Doesn't mean that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't something that happened to further another agenda. But I think where Jones is tripped up, I think you hit the nail on the head there, is he made it personal. And he seemed to go after some of these family members in a very aggressive way. It reminds me, Michael, of when Fusilier Lee Rigby was murdered in the UK some years ago. Now, some people will tell you to this day that was some engineered false flag attack. I don't think it was, to be honest. But whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, a certain so-called or self-styled investigative journalist here started harassing the family of Fusilier Lee Rigby, and he went to prison for it. Now, I'm all for free speech, but I had a lot of sympathy for the mother of Lee Rigby, and I would have sympathy with the families of the Sandy Hook, the Connecticut children, if indeed, you know, some children or children did die. It's a complex one, this, Michael. You know, where does free speech begin and responsibility come into it? It's very important as broadcasters that we keep it in mind. I have a feeling Alex is in trouble here, Michael. I really do.
I think he may be, and again, you know, he crossed that line. And when you're a journalist, when you are a reporter, you do have that extra responsibility to your audience to be as accurate as you can, to present the facts, let them decide for themselves. But when you use your bully puppet, if you will, to launch personal attacks on people, then you cross the line. And I think that's where Alex may have made his mistake. So the big question is, again, I think the goal here is to bankrupt him. And I notice that the timing of the lawsuit coincides with his deplatforming by all the major social media, which is really starting to cut into his audience numbers.
Yeah, it's dreadful to see that. I won't condone that. I mean, I've been a colleague of Alex's for many years, like yourself. I've had him on programs for years. I guested with him a couple of times over the years. Moved away from him when he started endorsing politicians and started doing some of the stuff that was kind of, you know, anathema to what he'd been doing for many years. Finally, to leave Alex alone for a moment, how do you think his core supporters, Michael, will react to his what looks like his plan to claim, well, sure, look, I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist anyway defence? You know, because that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. Alex coming out and saying, well, it's all entertainment and I'm just a crazy guy who shouts and rants. How's that going to go down with the hardcore listeners, do you think?
I don't think it's not going to go down very well, and it did not go down very well because Alex originally presented himself as an independent media journalist. He declared right at the outset he was going to be a supporter of Israel. That's the reason Jones and I eventually parted company. He said some things about me that were clearly defamatory. I just don't feel like calling lawyers over the situation. But when you do something like that, you can be in trouble, because even if Halberg proves his case that the official story is a hoax, Alex's statements are still defamatory. And so, yeah, Alex is probably going to be in a little bit of trouble here.
Just on the Zionism thing before we move away, the fact that he never, at least not that I can remember, and if I'm wrong, I'll own up to it on tomorrow's programme and I'll admit it, but I've never known him to ever offer even the slightest criticism of the behaviour of the Israeli government, ever. And there are those who sometimes get their underpants in a knot because they see conspiracies around every corner, and we've got to be mindful of that. But there are some who say that Alex has been some sort of psyop on the public all along. I don't agree with that, but there are those who think that. What do you think?
I think obviously there's some control being exerted over Alex because of his popularity and his presence out there in the independent media. But Alex started out saying he was a supporter of Israel. There's a YouTube video from very early in his career where he's just out there on the microphone saying, I will always support Israel. Now, to be fair, though, following that bloody massacre down on the fence with Gaza, Alex Jones has come out with some very gentle wrist slap criticisms of the government of Israel. It's probably still not enough to satisfy Alex's doubters, as it were. But I think Israel's behavior has become so outrageous, even hardcore supporters like Alex Jones are having trouble maintaining support for them.
Had Edwina Curry, former government minister, on the programme in the first hour. We talked quite a bit about Israel. Trump has, I should address him properly, of course. I should speak about him properly. The president, Donald Trump, has said that basically US aid to Gaza is going to end. I suppose, Mike, you're obviously not surprised at all by that. How serious is that for humanitarian efforts inside Gaza? Is it a real blow, that?
It is a real blow here. The U.S. has been funding Gaza, basically Palestine in general, as kind of a way of sort of keeping them under control and not starting a new intifada against Israel. But the pressure from Netanyahu and Trump is ratcheting up. Trump wants to basically push his new great deal for the Palestinians. And his first step is to stop all the money going on in. Then he's going to turn around and say, if you'll go along with this deal, which includes giving up your right of return, we'll let the money come on back in. And so far, he's not getting a positive response from the Palestinians. We're seeing, in fact, just more and more hostility and anger coming out of Palestine. But the situation there is dire. Every Friday when they have that March of Return down by that fence, more of the Palestinians are being wounded or killed by the Israelis, who are shooting them with these expanding butterfly bullets. And Israel has simply shut all the border crossings. Nothing can get in there. The hospitals are basically running on emergency fuel put in by the UN, but even the UN is running into friction. They've had to stop all cancer treatments in Gaza. They've simply run out of medication. That's how dire the situation is. And now we're hearing from Israel's government that their new plan is they simply want to make Gaza and the West Bank so unlivable, the Palestinians will leave and move over to Jordan. And of course, Jordan is saying, no, we don't want them either. So it is a very ugly situation. And I think most people understand Israel is behaving very badly toward what are effectively their own people. And a lot of people wish it would stop. And a lot of people are very ashamed of our government, that our government continues to support this.
Yeah, and I don't think you're seeing it in the US on the scale we're seeing it here. But obviously there's a massive movement here to make, well, to basically delegitimize criticism of Israel, to make criticism of Israel illegal. You know all about this, adopting the International Holocaust Committee Remembrance, their definition of anti-Semitism, which the UK's Labour Party seemingly is reluctant to adopt, basically on one or two clauses. One of the clauses being that, you know, the word Zionist. I mean, I think most right-minded, most, you know, ordinary-minded, most sane people differentiate between their Jewish neighbours and between Zionists operating in you know, on the Gaza Strip. I don't know, and I've been in leftish politics for years, covering it, writing about it, talking about it, meeting with people. I don't know. I've never encountered people who they look at Jewish people in any community, whether it be in Arkansas, whether it be in Hawaii, whether it be in Manchester, and they blame Jews for the actions of the Israeli government. It just doesn't happen. I don't see any evidence of it. But massive movements here, Michael, to basically, you know, to give Zionists the power to frame the debate on Israel. In other words, to say, you can talk about Israel if you want, but within these parameters. That's no good. But you're not seeing that so much in the US, as far as I know.
Oh, well, we're seeing the big pushes on here also regarding the new definition of anti-Semitism, which basically says that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, which is absolute nonsense. That's like trying to defend the crimes of the Nazis by saying, well, that's only because you hate the German people. Otherwise, nobody would complain.
Yeah, fair enough. Michael Rivera is our guest. We've got Mike for another 5 minutes or thereabouts. Check out whatreallyhappened.com. Got to ask you, Michael, about John McCain. You know, as long as I've been following the news and geopolitical events, which I began to take very seriously in the mid to late 1990s, John McCain always fascinated me, Michael. Because, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you know more about him and about it than I do, but this is a man, a genuine, like his story is genuine in terms of this is a POW survivor, spent 5 years in captivity in Vietnam, and then he went on to be, you know, he came out of that, he got his life back together, he built his life, but he became one of the more, I suppose, hawkish is a fair word to describe, I think, of...
yes.
Didn't he, Michael? Now, how could you spend 5 years as a prisoner of war in a country that you know you destroyed? 4 million people were killed. The war was completely wrong. It was illegal. The US and her allies destroyed Vietnam. How could you go from his situation in life to becoming what he became? That's why I find John McCain so fascinating, Mike. What do you make of him? What do you make of his legacy?
Well, there's a hidden side to John McCain, which is now coming out on the independent media. It's actually been out for a while. First of all, when he was a POW, he was actually treated very well because the North Vietnamese knew he was the son of an admiral and realized what a propaganda coup it was to have him. And as a matter of fact, the guy who was in charge of the prison where McCain was kept went public in an interview about 3 weeks ago saying that McCain was never tortured. His injuries all resulted from the malfunction of his ejection seat out of the airplane, and that he was treated very well by the very best doctors. And at one point, you need to understand, McCain actually made audio tape recordings for the North Vietnamese along the lines of Tokyo Rose. That was an act of treason. And he would have been tried for treason, except that Richard Nixon issued a blanket pardon for all returning POWs. But McCain has had a charmed life because his father was an admiral. He was able to evade consequences for a lot of things that he did when he was very young. He was considered a lousy pilot. He lost quite a few airplanes, including the one he was shot down in. And there are a lot of former POWs and veterans who are starting to go public saying this myth that they're building of John McCain. I mean, don't forget, this is the guy who was, you know, part of the Keating 5 scandal, was over there in Syria working with ISIS, trying to get Assad out of power. And you're right, he's a warmonger. He never met a war he did not like. Yeah, I had heard over the years whispers that the entire story, the backstory about his captivity wasn't entirely true. I don't know. I mean, to be fair to you, you're speculating as well. You don't know for sure either. But you know, Mike, well, if I can interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One of the recordings that John McCain made for North Vietnam has surfaced, and it's online. It's on YouTube, and this information is coming on out. And we've had 6 days of this attempt to basically revise John McCain's history for the history books, so he looks like he's a really good guy. But if you talk to anybody who ever actually worked with him or flew with him or served with him, they say he was a spoiled brat. He could get away with anything that he wanted because daddy was an admiral, and he was as corrupt as they come. Again, getting on back to the Keating 5 scandal.
Mike, I could speak with you all night. Thanks for coming back on with me today. Folks, if you haven't previously checked out whatreallyhappened.com, serious journalism, check out Mike's radio show, daily, terrific show as well. All the details at whatreallyhappened.com. Thanks for that. You've knocked me there at the end with the McCain stuff. I'm fascinated by that. I'm going to start reading about that later on.
Yes.
Thanks, Mike. I look forward to doing it again next month with your permission, mate. Thanks as always. Great to have you on.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. We'll talk to you next month.
Cheers, Mike. The great Michael Rivero, live on the line from Oahu in Hawaii. Check out whatreallyhappened.com. Top man is Michael Rivero. 20 minutes to the top of the hour. It's the Richie Allen Show, live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester. Tune in radio, richieallen.co.uk, and of course, triggerwarning.tv. Plenty of places to hear the programme. Now, speaking of the programme, I'm going to take some music, then I'm going to have a break. When I come back, I told you there's a significant change to the programme from now, from the end of this programme. And I'll tell you what that is and why, without boring the arse off you in a couple of minutes' time. But I want to hear this from Morrissey. I've not heard this for ages. On the Richie Allen Show, this is You're the One for Me, Fatty from Morrissey, nothing like it. Manchester's finest, 20 to the top of the hour. Back with more in a couple of minutes. Right, a bit of Morrissey there. You know the comedian Kevin Hart, very funny guy. He's been in a few, probably not the best films of all time. He's a funny man though. If you ever see him being interviewed, he's funny. He's very witty. I like Kevin Hart. It's a good laugh. I noticed a few months ago that he was coming to Manchester to the Arena, and the future Mrs. Allen was interested in going to see him, to be fair to her. And I didn't act on it, so we're not going to see him. We won't see him. But I did notice at the time that it said very clearly on the Ticketmaster website that you cannot use a mobile phone at the gig, and anybody who is found to be using one will be ejected. Now, this is before the tickets went on sale. Wait for it, dear listener. You probably know this if you're keeping an eye out. If you're keeping one eye on the news today, you will know this. But apparently, people have been kicked out of his concerts all over the place here in the UK because they were too fucking thick to read the terms and conditions. And they're not happy about it. They're screaming and crying, and apparently some of them were calling national radio stations today because they took their phone out and the phone police turned up and said, "Get out. You've got to leave. No refund." Fans were left frustrated, writes the BBC, with the strict policy, some claiming they were removed from the venue for as little as sending a text. You were fucking told not to use your phone when the man was on stage. Although, if the truth be told, Kevin Hart is probably more worried about people filming it and then putting it on YouTube and then spoiling it for future audience members. It makes perfectly good sense to me that if you're a stand-up comic and you've got a show, which will be the same pretty much every night in every city, there'll be a bit of improv, but the fundamental gags, the observational humour will be the same. Why do you want some dickhead putting it on YouTube and then somebody goes to the show and doesn't find it funny because they've already heard it? I think that's what it's all about. Chris Rock did it. But when Chris Rock did it, you had to hand the phone in and you got a ticket for it. It was put into a pouch and you were given a ticket. How did that work? Because everybody who goes to a show has a phone, right? Surely they didn't take 20,000 phones in, but they must have done. Anyway, they're bitching about it. The millennial snowflakes are crying about it. Stop crying. Read the terms and conditions. Kevin Hart doesn't want people filming him, putting it on YouTube. And why do you go to concerts anyway and watch them through your screen? Live a bit. Watch the artist on stage. The future Mrs. Allen and I are sickened when we go to concerts, and we go to concerts all the time. People, they're watching it through their phones. Fuckwits. What are you going to do with those videos? You're never going to watch them again. You put it on YouTube, it's crap. Nobody watches it. The sound is terrible. Your hands are shaking anyway. Mad world we're living in. Mad world. So they're all complaining about Kevin Hart. I say good for you, Kevin Hart. You're the man. Back with an update on the future of this programme after a very short break.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. they become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Right, welcome back. 12 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Charlotte went to see Kevin Hart with her sister on Friday for her sister's birthday. Charlotte, how are you, by the way? Nice to hear from you. Burnley. Charlotte's in Burnley. We were told 10,000 times not to get our phones out, said Charlotte. And you know what, Charlotte? You managed to not only hear that, but to accept it and not to do it. Therefore, you saw the rest of the show. Rich tweets, we will be watching concerts through virtual reality glasses soon on our sofas. That's right. Bob Stew tweets, the recording of live comedy shows will be uploaded and give away the jokes. Spot on, Bob Stew. That's exactly what it is. Who could blame the stand-up comic? It's one thing to go and see your favourite rock band. You know, the rock bands don't care if you film it because, well, they're going to do their greatest hits, so the audience knows what they're going to get anyway. But when gags are being told, there you go. Right. Some news for you. Now brace yourself. I don't know how you're going to react to this. I mentioned at the top of the programme, it's been a very difficult time for me, health-wise and energy-wise, over the last few months. It came to a head early in August when I basically collapsed. And I wrote about this on the website, and there were some people doing some tweeting for me. And, yeah, sorry, I got caught there. I was looking at music. And I've had a serious think about the way the programme is going to proceed and what I need to do to make life more, to make things more workable for me in a way that I can do the programme, but be healthy and be energetic and not to get so bogged down with it again. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to spit it out. The programme will be on Monday to Thursday, as usual, for 2 hours. And it'll be on at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. But during the week, the programme is going to start earlier and finish earlier. So it's going to be live at 5 p.m. UK time, Monday to Thursday. 2 hours to finish at 7, the same format. I'll be introducing guests to talk about things not in the media. I'll be rounding up the news. It's going to be 5 to 7. I thought long and hard about it. I laboured the point in an article that I put on richieallen.co.uk because a lot of people don't understand it. That this programme is produced, edited and introduced exclusively by me. It's just me. I have no producer. I have no editor. I have no assistant. I have nothing. It is me doing this. And this is a mainstream media quality radio show. If I was doing this for a commercial radio station, I would have 2 people with me to share the workload, the audio editing, the social media stuff, guest sourcing, researching what guests are going to do. I don't have that. It's just me. And after 4 years, it'll be 4 years in the middle of September in a couple of weeks' time, it got to me. The crazy workload, starting like you start your job at 8 o'clock in the morning, but going through till 11 o'clock at night. Something had to give somewhere. And what's going to give is the time the program begins. Now, that will piss some people off because they like to listen live between 7 and 9. And I'm not immune or unsympathetic to those who will be pissed off by it. But by the same token, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. Right? We live in an era where, and I can only speak about the Richie Allen Show because I only know, I don't know anything about anybody else's radio program, and I don't want to know about anybody. I don't care about what anybody else is doing. But this is an era where the majority of your audience gets it on demand anyway. We have a very healthy live audience, but it's a drop in the ocean by comparison to the numbers of people who download it from Podomatic or iTunes or Spotify or who listen on YouTube. Broadcasting in general is moving away from live. There's a but. I wouldn't do this show unless I could do it live and record it as I do it, because I get a kick out of doing it live. I can think of nothing more boring than interviewing somebody, then going out for a walk with the dog, then coming back, interviewing somebody else offline, putting together a little bit of a monologue, and then knitting it all together and putting it on the internet. I can't think of anything more boring. I wouldn't do it like that. It's got to be live. I'm old school. But I've got to have a life. And I've got to have a family life, which I've neglected miserably through the last 4 years by working to the late evening from the very early morning, passing my fiance, my partner, my life partner, my best mate, passing her on the stairs and only having a bit of time together at weekends. It's had a serious impact on our emotional well-being, and it had a serious impact on my physical well-being. So the way to do this, and I did this for years in Spain, and it will work, and it won't make any difference, but it will to you, but it will make a huge difference to me, is I broadcast live at 5 o'clock every day till 7, packed with interviews, packed with content, but I can get that program then on Podomatic and on iTunes by about 7:15 GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. We're in the summer now. By 7:15 I can get it on YouTube then a couple of hours later, but I can have some family time. I can have a life. And that's the way it's going to be. And that's all there is to it, really. You know, I had a serious scare this month, and it was building up last month. It was building up for months and months and months and months. Doing it this way won't affect the quality of the program, won't affect the output in terms of the length of it and the content of it, but it will give me, it will allow me to have time with my family and still do this job and do it the way I do it. If that's a source of frustration to you, I'm very sorry about that. But we live in the digital age when we grab most of what we listen to, most of what we watch even. We grab it when it suits us, not when it suits the presenters or when it suits the content creators. We've moved away from that, where the content creator dictates the terms. Not anymore. People want it when they want it. So I'll do it live. That will not change. This isn't the beginning of a spiral towards me not doing it live. It isn't. Nothing is. This is cast in stone. 2-hour live show at 5 makes it easier for me. The program is under no threat, no danger, and you listen to it live if you can, and if you don't, you listen to it on demand if you want or if you don't want to. And it's as simple as that. And much soul searching has gone into that, but it's the right decision for me. It's the right decision for the program, but most importantly, it's the right decision for my family, small and all as my family is. So that's it for today's program. I want to say a big thanks to you for bearing with me. Thanks for the kind words tonight. Thanks for the tweets. Big shout out, of course, to Edwina Curry. We love Edwina Curry, regardless of the fact that Edwina says things we don't like and stands for things we don't agree with. We like people who have the courage to come on and talk with us, knowing that we disagree with them fundamentally. And a huge shout out, of course, to Michael Rivero. Do check out whatreallyhappened.com if you haven't checked it out before. So then, just to finish on that, not to keep labouring the point and repeating it over and over again, tomorrow's programme will be live at 5 p.m. UK time. All of the internet, the YouTube, all of the blurb, all of the stuff online will all change to reflect that, to clearly reflect that the programme now moves. Think of it as radio presenters and radio stations, they move time slots all the time. I'm moving back 2 hours to 5 o'clock. It's a drive time show now. Same content. When I say the same content, same type of content, presented the same way for 2 hours every day. It's not going to change. It's not going to get any less. And I haven't taken the decision lightly, and I haven't. I have lost no interest in the programme. I've never been more committed to doing it, especially now that this decision has been taken. So there you go. I'm going to love you and leave you with a bit of Stevie Wonder, I think. Yeah, I've got some Stevie Wonder lined up. Join me at 5 tomorrow. If not, the programme will be on podcast at 7:15 p.m. tomorrow evening, and it will be repeating then constantly on richieallen.co.uk and on Fab Radio 2. All right, leaving you with Stevie Wonder. At least I hope I am. Have some Stevie, have I? I have. Right, until tomorrow, look after yourselves and one another. Thanks for bearing with it. Bye for now.